Good afternoon, everyone. The name of my project is Bon Appetit. Next, I will introduce you to the development process of my project 1 and 2. The raw material I chose during Unit 1 was everyday food. Since coming to London to live and study on my own, food has become an important companion in my life. I've had to deal with a variety of ingredients almost every day, so I decided to focus on the relationship between human and food, as well as how humans must rely on food to survive. I found out that food-related information is flooding our lives. After starting my research with the keyword food and human, I browsed through different photos and art pieces. It was interesting to find out that many artists choose to make food very seductive and sexy. I was curious as to why this was the case, so I narrowed my research by adding another keyword. Then I started searching for connection between food, human, and sex. These are the artworks that inspired me during my research. I referenced a number of photographs with food as the subject, which became more enticing and suggestive under the photographer's lens. After researching many artists' work on food and sex, I found that what the artists want to express was almost always a fusion of two primordial desires, reflecting through artistic treatment the various social phenomena mostly concerning human sexual desires. That's why I tried to find a new idea from the perspective of food, and was inspired by a book called Romance on the Table, a popular science book about how food, plants reproduce. After researching it, I realized that the colorful sex between plants makes the sex between animals seem ordinary, so I kept going deeper in my research by getting to know more about the sex of food. I present the sexuality of food in an anthropomorphic way, hoping to make it simple and straightforward for the audience to understand how plants reproduce, while also expressing that in a humorous and relaxed style. For my research on how tomatoes reproduce, I used mixed media and collage presentations. The image of the tomato was cartoonized to make it easier to understand. In the first phase of the project, I focused my research more on the sexuality of food, making it more like a science book, which I found didn't quite fit with the connection I wanted to make between food and human sexuality. It was not what I wanted to say to the audience, so I decided to go back a few steps and find the starting point again for my research. Although the research and the result of the experiment at this stage were not accurate enough, but I learned how to expand and deepen the research theme by starting with keyword. Appetite and sexual longing are both underlying human desires. In Project 2, I wanted to find commonalities between appetite and sexual desire through research, reflecting that both are merely a projection of desire. Humans are always in need of food and are never satisfied with love. Many films and literary work like to use appetite to suggest the human need for love, sex, and other spiritual aspects. During the research phase, I add research into film and television to get inspiration from the seventh art. Here are the films I referenced during my research. I have researched a collection of different kinds of food that are often depicted in fine art pieces. They are also often used as representation of desire. I analyzed the reason of their development. We employ many of the same senses when we eat as we do when we have sex. I have made some experimental illustrations based on sensory similarities. Collage and mixed media were used to combine sex and eating in the same image. Countless metaphors about food consumption can be employed to describe sex acts: eating pussy, sucking dick, tasting or wanting to devour a lover. In Chinese medicine, food is often used to nourish the human reproductive organs for the purpose of improving sexual function and fertility. People in China use idiom 滋阴补阳 to describe a certain type of food that is beneficial for female or male reproductive abilities. I chose a riddle poem I saw in a book as inspiration to make an illustration for it. Bread, swell, warmth, and oven. All these words bring to my mind images of warm tones, as they are used to reflect the riddle's references to those words. I have decorated the poem with some abstract shape around it, resembling both the human body and the swollen doll. I have combined humans and food to create a series of illustrations that express appetite and eroticism. Through this book, I hope to express how similar it is for humans to eat food and to enjoy sex, to reveal through these similarities that there is no difference between the two types of desire that we have. The sensational menu. I started with the sense, looking at how people use the same sense when they enjoy food as they do when they enjoy sex. We often use verbs that are only used in cooking for sex, so I rearranged these verbs in a series of illustrations. Both eating and sex are pleasurable activities that can be shared or indulged in alone. After the art book was done, I found that there were still holes in my work. It was more of a mind map and didn't do a good job at expressing exactly what point I was trying to make. I hadn't identified what group my audience was when I started my work at, and hadn't worked out where I stood, so I went back to the primary research and did some relevant questionnaire research based on my topic and interviewed my friend around me, and after that, conducted a new research. What does a world where I talk about sex as much as I talk about food look like in my head? Replacing the scenes of eating with sex, I created a short animation film and chose a few common scenarios.
Hello. Huh? Hey. Oi, 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 oi. Hmm. 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 Mm. 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 Mm.
In the course of Project 1 and 2, I realized that I am not being clear enough about where I stood and what my audience was. So in the main project, I will use my existing research base and define my future audience, situate my work in a community, and choose a more appropriate theme to research and develop. Thank you for listening.